Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Cranky Gun Reviews. This is going to be another one of those don't do what I did public service announcement type videos. Now you see here I have my modern sporting rifle out on the cleaning mat, and you see that I have two different carry handle sights. Now I'm going to talk about why you really don't want to go buy a really budget-minded AR-15 or M4, M2, whatever style carry handle sight. I did a video similar to this before talking about scopes, where I basically said that I learned my lesson buying a very cheap center point scope that failed on me, and I thought it was my gun that was having issues, but it was really the scope. So don't go out and buy the cheapest thing, even though they may look the same. I'm going to go over some differences between these two carry handle sights, or whatever you want to call them. I call them carry handle sights because to me that's what they are. So let's go over the differences between these two, why one's much better than the other one, and why not to buy a cheap one. So I will say this is actually the second time I've gone through this. The first time I think I got a little bit lucky. I had bought like a Tacstar or some brand that was kind of well known, but it was a relatively inexpensive carry handle sight. I think that first one I bought was around 60 bucks. That was on my Smith & Wesson Sport 1 AR-15 lower, or upper rather, that I had a few years back, and it actually worked really well. This time around, when I built my AR-15, I bought this very budget-minded carry handle, and it was always loose and rattly on the gun. It didn't hold zero very well because it moved. And I started doing a lot of research into carry handles and figured out, well, I mean, I knew it was built in China. It was a very inexpensive model. I think I paid like 30 or 35 bucks for this, maybe 50 bucks, I don't remember. And you know, it looks pretty decent. It's got the numbers on the dial here. It's got the Z for 0. It has the up and down, which is telling you when it turns. Well, actually, when this turns, that's up, to the right is down. When you turn the dial on the side, it tells you to the right or to the left. So, I mean, it looks, again, fairly decent. It has nice notches on the back that tell you where your sight is centered. And when you twist it back and forth, you can actually see the tick marks move. So, I mean, everything about it looks decent. It has your short range aperture, your long range aperture. But when I put it on the gun, I noticed a couple of things. These little pins on the bottom that hold it on your Picatinny rail are actually almost completely flush with the body of the carry handle. So what happens is when you bolt it on top of the gun, it'll actually wiggle back and forth. And it doesn't matter how much force you put on these screws, it always wiggles back and forth. So again, the machining tolerances, the size of the screws, and everything on this are not quite to specification. And I'll tell you how to tell a cheap carry handle from a good one if you're going out and looking at these at a gun show or pawn shop or something like that. So this being a very cheap one, this is a cast aluminum body. It does have a steel wheel and I think a steel rear sight on it. The thumb wheels on here are made out of steel, and this bracket that holds it on the pick rail are all made out of steel as well. But I can tell that this is cast versus being forged, and you want to look for a forged one, not a cast one. You see these circles on the sides of the body? Also these imperfections up here on the top. And again, this side you really can't see the casting marks on it. But specifically on this side, you can see those three circles. Those are casting marks from where they poured the molten aluminum into a mold. That's what's left over from the mold. So that right there will tell you that this is a very cheap carry handle, cheaply made. Now again, when you look at the bottom of this, these screws should actually be standing proud of the frame quite a bit, enough that when you run your thumb across them, there's a pretty big bump that your thumb has to go over. This is what locks it into the channels on the Picatinny rail, and if these, like this one, are almost flush with the body, it allows it to walk back and forth, and I'll show you that on the gun in a little bit. The other thing to look at is the size of the thumb wheels and how thick and pronounced this piece of metal is that holds it on the gun. So let's take a look at a good carry handle. Now this one I lucked out when I bought it. I bought it off of eBay and the guy had it listed for like $12 because it's just a generic carry handle. Well, there's a couple of things on this that tell me that this is a good quality carry handle. For one, this has a keyhole shape on the side of it with the number 4, And I'm not sure what the number 4 means. Maybe it's just the 4th revision of this particular one. But that keyhole actually means that this was forged by a reputable company. And there's listings online that you can look up that have all the forging marks on the sides of these things. But that little keyhole tells me that this was forged by a reputable company. Now I flip it over to this side. Obviously you see all of those circles that were on the cheaper one are not present on this particular one. And if I hold these two side by side, look at the difference in the size of the thumb wheels. This one is about 50% larger than this one. So these thumb wheels are much easier to tighten up with your hands than these, and they're much more pronounced. Now, if you look at this metal bracket on the side, this is what clamps onto the side of the pick rail. Again, if you look at how pronounced this one is, it's a very pronounced C shape. It's almost like if you took a stop sign and cut the side of it off. That's what this one looks like. Versus this one here, which is just barely stamped. So there's not a whole lot of clamping force on this cheaper one versus what you have on this one. Now, if you look on the bottom of this one again, these screws that go through here, they're staked in. So if you look really closely, you can actually see that there's some little ridges around the outside of these. So they're pressed in there so the screws won't spin, but they also stand proud quite a bit. So if you look at this from the end, you can see that these screws stand out quite a bit. When this goes on the gun and you clamp it down, it is extremely, extremely tight. It doesn't walk around whatsoever. Some of the other subtle things you can see, this one obviously has the numbers stamped into the wheel, the adjuster wheel. It has your little Z for 0. There's a line on the frame on this one that actually tells you where your sights are set. So this is 500 and 300 meters. That's my 0. And there's a little line in the frame there. Again, something about this one, it has the numbers on the thumb wheel, but there's no line on the top of that thumb wheel on the frame to tell you where it is. So I guess they're using this little roll pin on the bottom as your marker on the side. But again, not a great way to do it. Doesn't take much to just strike a mark in the side of it so you know where it is. This one also has your long range aperture and your short range aperture. And this one, when you flip your short range aperture up, it actually says 0 and 2, which is for your close range out to 200 meters. And then when you flip it up, that's your long range aperture up to, I think, 600 meters. So again, the forging marks on the side, the absence of the casting marks in the frame, the size of the thumb wheels, how pronounced this bracket is that clamps onto your Picatinny rail, and how deep your screws are here are all going to tell you that this is a quality sight versus the other one, which is a cheap garbage sight. Just some of the other things, the amount of play that's in the back sight here. This one has very little play side to side. This particular one, when I had it on the gun, I actually had to jam a piece of paper in here to keep the sight straight, because when you let it go slack, it actually turns it sideways enough that it was messing up my sight. So I jammed a piece of paper in there to keep it straight. But just little things about this. Also, this one weighs much less than the forged one because there's a lot less material in it. So let's show you how these look on the gun. So starting out with the cheap one, I'm going to loosen up these thumb wheels pretty far to give me a bunch of slack on this side bracket. I'm going to stick it on the gun using this rear screw to go into the rearmost notch on the Picatinny rail, which also has a little symbol cast into the frame. Put that on there, and I'm going to cinch these down as tight as I can by hand. And look at that sight still moves back and forth. And again, part of that is because the screws going through this do not protrude down far enough into the Picatinny rail. The other problem is that these thumb wheels do not give you enough grip to actually tighten it up far enough. And now they're stuck. I can barely get them off by hand. So that's the garbage sight. Now let's look at the good one. So the thumb wheels are much bigger on there, much easier to go on. You just got to make sure you have it seated correctly on the rail. There you go. Tighten these thumb wheels down all the way by hand. And you look, there is no movement fore and aft on that sight whatsoever. I can't move it at all. And these thumb wheels, I didn't even have to tighten up that tight. It's just because the shape of this bracket that holds it on the side of the receiver, the size of the thumb wheels, and those screws that go into the Picatinny rails are actually the correct size. So now you have a nice A2 style looking modern sporting rifle with the correct type carry handle that'll actually work and hold zero, and it won't flop around when you're shooting. And again, if you look online, you can find these for decent deals. Just make sure you're buying a forged one. This one, again, I bought for around $12 from a guy on eBay with about, I don't know, $8 shipping or something like that. I paid just over $20 for it. And realistically, this carry handle probably goes for about $75 to $100 online. Obviously, you can buy a Colt one, or you can buy a lot of the other name brand ones that are out there. But if you don't know who manufactures it, look for those key elements. Again, make sure you don't see casting marks on the side like this, which would signify that it's a cheaper model. Make sure if they show the bottom pictures of it that it has, again, it's tough to tell in pictures if the screws are pronounced, but if you're looking at these in person, certainly look for the casting marks. If it has casting marks on it and it's 40, 50, 60 bucks, don't buy these things. They're just not worth it. Always try to go for a forged model that you can find that will look better. It will actually attach to your gun, hold zero, and clamp down tightly on your rail. So just another quick public service announcement, again, from Cranky Gun Reviews. I actually have a SIG Romeo 5 red dot for this gun and a backup iron sight. The problem is, because this one has a front sight post on it, I have a really hard time shooting with the Romeo 5 red dot on this particular gun. If I wanted to build one of these that had a better ability to use a red dot, I would get one that's just a flat top receiver that has a rail all the way down the barrel. Then you can put backup iron sights on the front and rear and run a red dot, and you'll have better luck. So for me, I just get distracted by the front sight when I'm using the red dot. That's why I wanted to find a quality carry handle for this gun. Plus, as I've stated before, I kind of like the look on these. If I could get a M16 style triangular handguard for the front of this thing, I would, just because I love the way the M16s look. But this is the best I'm going to get with the fixed buttstock and the plastic grip on the front with the fixed sight post in the front. I really like the way this looks. Again, the A2, A4 style rifle, and I'm very happy with it. So just another public service announcement from Cranky Gun Reviews. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. God bless America. Support your two-way rights. Get out there and vote in this election coming up. Make sure when someone asks you to give up some of your freedom for the greater good, you remind them that freedom is the greater good.